Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. In this video we'll be talking about multipathing, but also there was a changelog today, which was kind of surprising. Update 2.35.1.121 came out for the live server, and basically there was a fix in North Holland. Basically, there was a bug that caused buildings on the North Holland location to have low resistance to damage, making it possible to destroy them with machine gun fire. That's been fixed, so people were just going around gunning down a bunch of buildings. And also, they have increased the gambling in the game. So basically, the rookie trophies with vehicles available in the in-game item shop for Golden Eagles are now updated twice as often, so every 15 days. So there are now 7 trophies instead of 12 at any given time. So instead of having 12 over a period of a month, you now have 7 over 15, meaning 14 over the overall month. So let's talk about the main parts of the video after having a look at the changelog. And it's the big word right now. Pretty much when it comes to War Thunder, the way that everything works is we're only allowed to talk about one real topic at a time, and it's usually based around whatever new is being added to the game. So for the longest time, the big topic, especially in top tier aviation, was the idea of reducing team size. Because there are so many missiles flying around, what needs to happen is you need to have less people around, so therefore you have less missiles, and therefore you can counterplay a bit better. So what did Gaijin do? They added in a switch to be able to make it have smaller battles if you wanted to, and kept the default, as it has been for a long time. So that kind of is fixed. So now we're moving on to the next thing, which is the multipathing. Now, in terms of multipathing, what does that mean? It depends if you want to look at the realistic or historical way it works, or if you want to look at it in War Thunder. The simple explanation, without going into too much of it, basically, when you have missiles, whether they're active radar homing or semi-active radar homing, they have to rely on their radar tracking, right? So if it's an active radar homing missile, it relies on its own seek ahead to radar lock, and if it's a semi-active, it is from the radar from the vehicle itself, so the plane that's guiding in the missile. Now, what happens is if you stay closer to the ground, there is a lot of clutter when it comes to the radar signature that it's trying to track. So if you are actually low to the ground or lower than usual, then it is easier for a missile to get lost and therefore hit the ground. Now, the way that this is modeled in War Thunder is there is kind of a blanket distance that you can be high enough, or low enough, I should say, and it pretty much negates a lot of semi-actives or active radar homing missiles unless the person firing it is below you, which is quite hard to do. So previously, this distance was 100 meters. So if you were 100 meters off the ground, you didn't really have to worry about semi-active radar homing missiles or active radar homing missiles. In one of the most recent dev servers that they did, they changed that to 50 meters, meaning that you have to be 50 meters off the ground in order to negate this effect of the missiles. So basically halving the defensive capabilities of many vehicles, and on a lot of maps where you have different altitudes and also different setups, it's going to be harder to do. So pretty much that. Now, this has caused a lot of debate because you have you actually have multiple sides. It isn't just two sides. The first side is the realistic angle, right? So multipathing is a real thing, and the problem is it affects different missiles and different radars in different ways. And this means that if you wanted to actually implement it as realistically as possible, it would be incredibly busted because it would mean certain nations would get access to very, very powerful missiles, which would not really be able to be stopped, and then other nations wouldn't. We've actually had this before at top tier. Now, if you remember the F-14 times, where it was the F-14 versus the MiG-23, when the Tomcat was added way before it should have been because a movie got released, basically it led to dominance from one side over the other because they had more capabilities than the side that they were facing. So the F-14s were incredibly powerful against standard MiG-23s and so on. Nowadays, the way that they've done it, most nations get access to new mechanics, or at least a version of the new mechanic at the same time, so it makes it a little bit easier. But that's the first part. Basically, you make it as realistic as possible, different missiles have different characteristics. They all have their own unique kind of multi-pathing distance that they work at, and even then that's debated depending on who you talk to. The other way of looking at it is from a gameplay point of view. There's a lot of people who want to break up the way that the game is played right now, since a lot of it leads to a furball in the center of a map because everybody has to stay really low, and therefore it's more IR-guided meta plus gun-guided meta instead of semi-active. But you can still use semi-active, so you just once again have to be lower than the target, but that's a lot harder to do if everybody's hugging the ground, right? So there's people who want to change with that. They want to be able to go high. They want to be able to go mid-altitude to try and shake it up, and also at the same time stop this bee's nest mentality. Now, my problem with this idea that it would change how the game actually works, is if you have a look at a bunch of other tiers of the game, whether it's props or early jets or low tiers, or even like, let's say 10-3 or something like that, where there are semi-actives, but hardly anybody uses them, right? Like you've got the FAD, which uses it, and then the R3Rs, and then of course the Phantom F4C, but it's not really something that's used a lot. Basically, you still have that furball that happens. So even if you take out all of those missiles, which don't work with those furballs, it still happens. Like especially at props, right? Everybody just climbs to the center, and it's whoever has the altitude or whoever has the turn, and then you can play off that, but most of the time it goes in. So the idea of making this change and then that's going to fundamentally change the meta, I would be very surprised. Let's just say that. And I get that people want, others to play more realistically, or they want people to play with more skill. In my time in War Thunder, that doesn't work. What ends up happening is instead people get frustrated, and they just stop playing, or they complain to change it, and then it gets changed and stuff gets a bit more dumber, which is what's happened with a lot of mechanics over the years, and also a lot of map design over the years too. So this idea of this mecha of making things more not just realistic, but also making it so more skill is needed, I don't really think that's going to work, because it never does in War Thunder. It just means people find what is the most broken thing, especially at top tier, because top tier is all about meta chasing, and then they just play that over and over again. And then if their nation that they've picked doesn't have it, they just don't play that part of the game, or they just go play other games. This happens it's like a cyclical setup. It happens all the time. So for me, the changes to multipathing don't really make that much of a difference. I think they're going to change it this update because they want more people to use the active radar homing missiles, since that's kind of the namesake of the update. So usually what happens is you'll have a new mechanic that'll come in. It'll be busted for, 3 to 6 months, and then in a future update, they add in something that's supposed to address the mechanic and address the defenses for it, and they do that, and that means you can stop it. And then after that, the vehicles that don't get access to that mechanic get crucified, and then you have a new meta at top tier, and then it kind of moves around over and over again. So I think we're in one of those periods of time where they're adding a type of missile which is going to be very powerful, and they're going to reduce the ways that you can defend against it, so therefore people play this and change this up the meta, and then later on you're going to have a defense added, which, you could have just easily had if they just kept what was there before. Whatever happens, obviously the meta is going to change. Some people are going to like it, some people aren't. For me personally, I never like it when defensive tactics are kind of removed from the game, just because it's so easy to just be offensive in this game, but very hard to actually play defensively. So whenever you put more tools in the offensive characters like playbook, it's a lot easier to actually play. And then also it means that the stock grind is even harder. And as a person who's been talking about this for many years, the stock grind, especially at high tier, is abysmal. It's really, really bad. And removing a way of people being to defend, or removing a way or making it harder for people to defend themselves, especially since they hardly have anything anyway, just seems like a bad idea. At the end of the day, will it make a huge difference, this change? Probably not. people will still just try and play the same way. They're just going to have to get close to the ground, and you'll have more people run into the ground. And if they change it further, I mean, maybe it'll have an effect. Where I don't see this reality that people talk about, though, the idea of like everybody standing off each other and then, notching away and going cold and doing all this stuff, because it ends up like the mentality that leads to is believing that every engagement is a one-on-one engagement, and that's not the case in War Thunder. The moment where you start flying defensively against one person, there'll be another person that capitalizes on that, and you'll have to deal with them, and they're the actual threat. So I find it very odd when this is never really brought up. But c'est la vie. We'll see what happens. At the end of the day, it'll all change in 3 months anyway. So why does it really matter? As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.